On the night of October 14th, 2002, a chilling quiet blanketed the small town of Danville, Kentucky. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. A world away from the darkness about to unfold in a modest brick home on Maple Street. Inside, 24-year-old Heather Lawson, a beloved local schoolteacher, had been preparing for the weekend. Known for her bright smile, dedication to students, and kind-hearted nature, Heather had spent her day grading papers and planning lessons for her middle school classroom. Neighbors had seen her earlier that evening walking her dog, waving to familiar faces with the same warmth that had made her a cherished member of the community. Hours later, when Heather failed to show up for a planned Friday evening dinner with her parents, alarm bells began to ring. Her father, Thomas Lawson, a retired firefighter, tried calling her cell repeatedly, each ring unanswered. Heather's mother, Patricia, grew anxious, knowing her daughter was usually punctual and conscientious. By midnight, they drove to her home, their unease growing with each passing mile. The sight that met them at the doorstep was the beginning of a nightmare. Heather's front door was ajar, the lock broken. Inside the home was eerily still, devoid of the sounds of a life once lived. Thomas and Patricia discovered their daughter in her bedroom, lifeless, the result of blunt force trauma. The scene was not only horrifying, but confusing. Nothing appeared stolen. The house was in order, and there were no immediate signs of forced entry beyond the door. It was as if someone had carefully orchestrated the crime, leaving the home intact, leaving behind only devastation. Danville police arrived swiftly, with detectives Mark Preston and Ellen Rivera taking the lead. They were seasoned officers, but immediately recognized the complexity of the case. There were no eyewitnesses, no clear motive, and very little physical evidence. Heather's murder was a jarring deviation from the town's low-crime environment. The detectives began with the basics, canvassing the neighborhood, questioning friends, family, and anyone who had interacted with Heather in the days leading up to her death. One detail emerged early on. Heather had recently ended a brief romantic relationship with a man named Daniel Hayes. Friends described Daniel as quiet but attentive. The breakup, according to those close to the couple, had been amicable, though Daniel had been visibly upset in the days that followed. Investigators brought him in for questioning, but Daniel cooperated fully and passed a polygraph test, clearing him as a suspect. The investigation quickly hit a wall. There were no fingerprints beyond Heather's and those of family members. No unidentified DNA was recoverable at the time. Forensic technology in 2002 could not detect the minute traces that modern testing could reveal. Detectives noted a peculiar lack of motive. Heather was well-liked, responsible, and had no known enemies. As weeks turned into months, leads dried up, and the case was officially classified as a cold case. For Heather's family, every day without answers was a torment. They organized neighborhood vigils, distributed flyers, and appealed to anyone with information, but the trail had gone cold. Life in Danville carried on, but the memory of Heather Lawson haunted the town. Parents held their children closer, neighbors watched one another with more suspicion, and the sense of safety that had defined Maple Street evaporated. Years passed, and the case remained unresolved. Police files collected dust, and the initial investigators retired or moved on, leaving Heather's parents with nothing but uncertainty and grief. Yet, the story was far from over. In 2017, 15 years after Heather's murder, Kentucky law enforcement established a cold case review unit. This unit, equipped with modern forensic technology and fresh investigative perspectives, aimed to revisit unsolved cases with new tools at their disposal. Detectives Jordan Mills and Olivia Carter were assigned to Heather Lawson's case. Their approach was methodical. They started by reviewing every report, every note, and every piece of evidence collected in 2002. Advances in DNA technology allowed them to re-examine the crime. Scene swabs, hair samples, and fibers that had been collected but never fully analyzed. Their review uncovered a trace of DNA previously undetectable using 2002 methods. This small but crucial discovery reignited the investigation. The DNA did not match anyone in the local or national databases initially, but it provided a starting point. Detectives Mills and Carter began digging into Heather's social circle, acquaintances, and any individuals who had recently interacted with her. They discovered an overlooked witness statement from a neighbor who recalled seeing an unfamiliar vehicle parked on Maple Street the night of Heather's murder. The vehicle had been described as a dark-colored sedan driven by a man wearing a baseball cap. This minor observation, ignored during the initial investigation, gained significance when cross-referenced with the newly identified DNA. The detectives began combing through DMV records, social media, and local employment records, searching for any correlation with the DNA profile. Months of painstaking research yielded a breakthrough. The DNA matched a man named Stephen Caldwell, a 38-year-old resident of a neighboring county with a criminal history including burglary and assault. Caldwell had never been linked to Heather Lawson in any documented interaction, but his proximity and prior offenses made him a person of interest. Detectives conducted a series of controlled surveillance operations to confirm Caldwell's routines, noting patterns that matched the night of Heather's murder. They obtained a warrant to collect a DNA sample directly from him, which confirmed a match to the DNA found at the crime scene. The revelation was shocking. The person responsible for Heather's murder had eluded capture for over 15 years, blending into the community while carrying a violent secret. Armed with this evidence, law enforcement prepared to arrest Caldwell. When officers arrived at his home, Caldwell appeared calm, unaware that forensic science had finally caught up with him. He was taken into custody without incident, but his demeanor offered no apology, no recognition of the years of pain he had caused Heather's family. As the news of Caldwell's arrest spread, the Danville community was stunned. For more than a decade, residents had speculated, worried, and feared the unknown perpetrator might strike again. The arrest brought both relief and a sense of disbelief. Justice, delayed but not denied, had finally arrived. Heather's parents were informed immediately. The moment they heard Caldwell had been arrested, emotions flooded them. Grief, anger, and cautious hope mingled together. They prepared to face the man who had taken their daughter's life, determined to ensure the legal process delivered the accountability they had waited for since that tragic night. Detectives Mills and Carter began assembling the case for prosecution. The DNA evidence, combined with Caldwell's prior criminal record, the witness statement regarding the vehicle, and circumstantial evidence linking him to Maple Street on the night of the murder, formed the backbone of the case. Prosecutors worked closely with the detectives to ensure the evidence was thorough and compelling, prepared to withstand any challenges by Caldwell's defense. Caldwell initially denied involvement during interviews, attempting to deflect and maintain innocence. However, the DNA evidence was irrefutable, and the detectives confronted him with the facts, including the witness account, his presence in the area, and the matching profile from the crime scene. Over time, under sustained questioning, cracks began to appear in his story. Though Caldwell never fully admitted guilt in the early stages, his inconsistencies and attempts to evade the truth provided the prosecution with leverage for court proceedings. The community, meanwhile, rallied around Heather's family. Neighbors, former students, and colleagues organized support networks, providing emotional reinforcement for Susan and Robert Lawson as they prepared to testify. Local media chronicled the investigation and arrest, emphasizing the dedication of law enforcement, the advancements in forensic technology, and the persistence of the family in seeking justice. As preparations for the trial continued, it became clear that Heather's case had become more than just a legal matter. It was a story of resilience, determination, and the enduring impact of a young woman's life on her community. For detectives Mills and Carter, the case exemplified the importance of never abandoning cold cases. Years of patience, meticulous investigation, and the integration of modern technology had finally allowed justice to catch up with a crime once thought unsolvable. While Heather's life could never be restored, the arrest of Stephen Caldwell represented a critical step toward closure for her loved ones, reaffirming the principle that time does not absolve wrongdoing and that the pursuit of truth can endure, even across decades. The months following Stephen Caldwell's arrest were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. Heather Lawson's parents, Patricia and Thomas, found themselves thrust into a world of legal procedures, interviews, and press inquiries, all while carrying the weight of a grief that had never fully lifted. The arrest had brought a sense of relief, but the road ahead promised a new type of challenge, preparing for a trial that would finally hold Caldwell accountable for his actions. Detectives Jordan Mills and Olivia Carter continued their meticulous work, ensuring every piece of evidence was carefully documented. Forensics teams revisited old reports, reanalyzed fibers and swabs, and reconstructed timelines with a precision that had been impossible in 2002. Every small detail mattered, from the positioning of objects in Heather's home to the faint tire tracks found near Maple Street. These minute pieces of evidence, when combined, painted a picture of Caldwell's presence on that fateful night. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence came from Heather's personal effects. Investigators discovered a partially torn note in her bedroom drawer, a fragment of a message left by someone she had been wary of in the days before her murder. The note was indecipherable in its entirety, but microscopic analysis revealed traces of Caldwell's DNA along the paper's edge. This finding, though subtle, further tied him to the crime scene and underscored the methodical nature of his actions. Meanwhile, Caldwell awaited trial in the county jail, facing a legal system determined to ensure he could not evade justice again. During pre-trial hearings, his defense team attempted to challenge the validity of the DNA evidence, claiming contamination or procedural errors. Prosecutors countered with detailed documentation, highlighting the advanced testing techniques that were unavailable in 2002 and the careful chain of custody maintained throughout the investigation. As the trial date approached, Heather's parents grappled with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. They knew the courtroom would be a place of confrontation, where they would be forced to relive the most traumatic moments of their lives. Yet, they also understood that this was the path to closure, a final step in honoring their daughter's memory and ensuring that Caldwell would answer for his actions. On the day the trial began, the courthouse was crowded with members of the local community, journalists, and supporters of Heather's family. The air was tense, a combination of curiosity, anger, and the unspoken hope that justice would be served. Opening statements set the stage. The prosecution painted Caldwell as a dangerous individual who had evaded capture for over a decade, using modern technology to finally connect him to a crime that had long haunted the community. They emphasized the persistence of law enforcement, the meticulous collection of evidence, and the irrefutable DNA match that placed Caldwell at Heather's home on the night of her murder. The defense, on the other hand, attempted to cast doubt on the investigation, suggesting that the DNA evidence could have been transferred inadvertently, or that Caldwell's prior criminal record unfairly influenced public perception. They focused on the absence of eyewitness testimony placing him inside Heather's home and questioned whether the small trace of DNA could definitively prove his involvement. Witnesses took the stand, each one adding layers to the narrative. Neighbors recalled the dark sedan and the man in the baseball cap, finally connecting the dots with Caldwell's known vehicle and appearance at the time. Friends of Heather described her life, her routines, and her cautious nature, underscoring the likelihood that she would have been vigilant against strangers. Forensic experts detailed the DNA testing process, explaining how advancements in technology allowed for detection of previously undetectable samples. They outlined the painstaking methods used to ensure accuracy and reliability, addressing the defense's claims of contamination or error. The prosecution presented a timeline of Caldwell's movements, cross-referenced with phone records, employment logs, and the neighborhood observations. Every detail was scrutinized, each piece reinforcing the narrative that he had intentionally targeted Heather and orchestrated the crime with calculated precision. During the trial, Heather's parents shared personal memories of their daughter, giving the courtroom a glimpse of the vibrant young woman whose life had been tragically cut short. Teachers, colleagues, and former students spoke of her dedication, her kindness, and the positive impact she had on those around her. These testimonies humanized the case, reminding everyone present that the trial was not just about evidence, but about a life stolen and the enduring pain inflicted on those left behind. Caldwell maintained a stoic exterior throughout much of the proceedings. He occasionally met the gaze of his attorneys or the courtroom gallery, but rarely showed emotion. At times, subtle shifts in his demeanor suggested unease, but he never openly admitted guilt. The trial was long and exhaustive, with both sides presenting extensive documentation, expert testimony, and corroborating evidence. After weeks of hearings, cross-examinations, and deliberations, the case moved to closing arguments. The prosecution summarized the chain of evidence, highlighting the DNA match, the witness account, and Caldwell's criminal history. They emphasized the persistence of investigators who refused to let time erase the truth. The defense argued for reasonable doubt, challenging the interpretation of evidence and questioning whether the passage of time might have affected the accuracy of witness recollections. The jury retired to deliberate, leaving the courtroom in a tense silence. Days later, the verdict was announced: guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder. Relief and grief intertwined as Heather's parents absorbed the news. After 17 years, justice had finally been served, and the person responsible for their daughter's death would face the consequences. Caldwell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence reflected the severity of his actions and the enduring impact of the crime on Heather's family and the community. In the weeks following the trial, the town of Danville began to process the long-overdue resolution. Community members held a memorial service for Heather, celebrating her life, her contributions as a teacher, and the indelible mark she had left on those who knew her. The service was both somber and hopeful, a testament to resilience in the face of tragedy. Detectives Mills and Carter reflected on the case, noting the importance of persistence, the evolution of forensic science, and the human element that drives investigations forward. Their work demonstrated that even after years, cold cases could be solved when determination met technology, and when investigators refused to allow injustice to remain unchallenged. Heather's parents, though forever changed by the loss, expressed gratitude for the resolution. They hoped their experience would serve as a reminder of the importance of revisiting cold cases, advocating for victims, and trusting that, even after years, answers could emerge. As the town moved forward, the story of Heather Lawson remained a powerful reminder of the fragility of life, the impact of crime on a community, and the enduring strength of those who seek justice. It underscored the message that while time may pass, the pursuit of truth and accountability never truly ends. After the verdict, Heather Lawson's parents, Patricia and Thomas, felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. The trial had been emotionally draining, but it had finally provided the long-awaited confirmation that justice had been served. For 17 years, they had lived with the uncertainty of their daughter's fate, the haunting questions of who had taken her life and why. Now, knowing that Stephen Caldwell would spend the rest of his life in prison, they could begin to process their grief in a new way. Detectives Jordan Mills and Olivia Carter, who had spearheaded the cold case investigation, spent the weeks following the trial reviewing every aspect of the case. They wanted to ensure that nothing had been overlooked, that all evidence had been correctly documented, and that the procedural record was flawless. Their work served both as a safeguard against future appeals and as a template for other cold cases in the region. The impact of the trial extended beyond the courtroom. The community of Danville, a small town in Iowa known for its quiet streets and close-knit residents, had been shaken by Heather's murder in 2006. Parents, neighbors, and local leaders reflected on how the unresolved case had changed daily life. Children were no longer left to play outside unsupervised, and residents were more cautious about unfamiliar people entering the neighborhood. The resolution of the case, however, brought a sense of restoration. Town meetings and community gatherings acknowledged the persistence of law enforcement and the bravery of the families who refused to let the case fade into obscurity. Heather's colleagues at the school where she taught organized a memorial scholarship in her name, aimed at supporting students pursuing careers in education. The initiative celebrated her life, her dedication to her students, and the positive influence she had on those around her. Detectives Mills and Carter also took steps to share the lessons learned from the investigation. They conducted training sessions for other law enforcement personnel, emphasizing the critical role of modern forensic techniques, such as advanced DNA testing, in solving cold cases. They highlighted the importance of re-interviewing witnesses, revisiting old evidence, and maintaining meticulous records. These sessions underscored that while technology evolves, the human element, observation, persistence, and critical thinking remains central to solving crimes. The resolution of the case also brought new challenges for Heather's family. While Caldwell was incarcerated, Patricia and Thomas had to navigate the complex emotions of closure intertwined with ongoing grief. The loss of their daughter could never be undone, and they grappled with the recognition that no sentence could truly compensate for 17 years of unanswered questions. Counseling and support groups became essential in helping them process these emotions. Pamela Green, Caldwell's former girlfriend at the time of Heather's murder, played a critical role in solidifying the prosecution's case. Her cooperation and willingness to recount events from over a decade earlier had provided essential corroboration for investigators. Pamela's testimony demonstrated the impact that courage and honesty could have in cold case investigations, particularly when coupled with forensic evidence. Meanwhile, Caldwell himself remained unrepentant. In prison, he continued to assert his innocence. Despite the overwhelming DNA evidence, witness accounts, and the detailed reconstruction of events, his attempts to appeal the conviction were met with repeated denials, as courts determined that the evidence against him was sufficient, reliable, and compelling. The persistence of investigators in revisiting overlooked evidence was key to Caldwell's capture. The partial DNA sample collected from Heather's personal effects in 2006 had lain dormant in a laboratory until technological advancements allowed for its analysis. When investigators reran the sample using modern methods, they obtained a complete profile that matched Caldwell, connecting him definitively to the crime. This breakthrough highlighted the importance of preserving evidence, even when initial tests fail to yield results. Beyond the technical aspects, the human stories intertwined with the investigation were profound. Neighbors who had been interviewed repeatedly over the years recounted their memories, providing context for Heather's life and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Friends and colleagues described her character, her daily routines, and her interactions with the community, reinforcing the understanding that this was not just a crime, but a disruption of a life fully lived. The trial also shed light on Caldwell's behavior in the days and weeks following the murder. Investigators reconstructed his movements through employment records, phone logs, and the accounts of acquaintances. These details demonstrated careful planning and an effort to conceal his involvement, further reinforcing the prosecution's argument that the crime had been intentional and premeditated. Forensics played a pivotal role in bridging the gap between the original investigation and the eventual resolution. Advanced techniques allowed investigators to analyze trace amounts of biological material, link fibers from clothing to the suspect, and validate witness observations with scientific precision. Each piece of evidence, no matter how small, contributed to a comprehensive case that ultimately led to Caldwell's conviction. In the months after the trial, the community began to heal, while the trauma of Heather's death would never fully fade. Residents found solace in the knowledge that the person responsible was no longer at large. Local law enforcement emphasized ongoing vigilance and community engagement, encouraging residents to report suspicious activity and participate in neighborhood watch programs. Patricia and Thomas, while forever changed by the events of 2006, found a renewed purpose. They became advocates for victims' rights, speaking at community forums and supporting initiatives aimed at preventing violence and ensuring timely resolution of criminal cases. They also worked with organizations dedicated to the preservation and analysis of cold case evidence, helping ensure that other families might find closure even after many years. The case of Heather Lawson became a reference point for law enforcement agencies across Iowa and neighboring states. It demonstrated the power of combining traditional investigative techniques with modern forensic science, the necessity of revisiting cold cases, and the impact that dedicated detectives could have on long unresolved crimes. The narrative of persistence, patience, and the refusal to accept unresolved tragedy resonated with investigators nationwide. On a personal level, Heather's story inspired her students, friends, and community members to appreciate the fragility of life and the importance of acting with integrity and vigilance. Her legacy, though forged through tragedy, became a source of strength, reminding everyone that even in the face of loss, the pursuit of truth and justice can prevail. For detectives Mills and Carter, the case was both a professional milestone and a personal affirmation of their dedication. Their relentless pursuit of leads, meticulous examination of evidence, and strategic application of modern technology had transformed a case that had lingered, unresolved for over a decade, into a decisive victory for justice. In reflecting on the investigation, they acknowledged that solving cold cases often requires more than just technical expertise. It demands empathy, persistence, and an unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth. The successful resolution of Heather Lawson's murder case in 2006 offered a measure of comfort to her family and the broader community. It demonstrated that time does not erase responsibility, that evidence, no matter how old, can provide answers, and that dedicated individuals can overcome the obstacles of delay, oversight, and the passage of years. While the pain of loss remained, the certainty of justice provided a foundation upon which healing could begin. The town of Danville, once overshadowed by fear and uncertainty, began to reclaim a sense of normalcy. Community members expressed gratitude to law enforcement, acknowledged the bravery of witnesses, and honored the memory of Heather Lawson through memorials, scholarships, and public recognition. The case became a lasting testament to the enduring value of investigative diligence and the critical role of modern forensic science in achieving justice. Ultimately, the story of Heather Lawson's murder and the subsequent conviction of Stephen Caldwell underscored a broader truth. While crimes may remain unresolved for years, the combination of technological advancement, persistent investigation, and the courage of those willing to speak can bring closure. For Patricia and Thomas Lawson, that closure came 17 years after their daughter's death. And while the loss could never be undone, the certainty that justice had been served offered a profound and lasting sense of peace.